Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple, creator of Nimble 5e, the fast and tactical variant of 5e's rule set, now coming back with a much bigger second edition, the one and only Evan Diaz. How you doing today, man?
Hey, doing pretty good.
Yeah, and congratulations on how well the backer kit did. You were asking for 5,000, you got $250,000 and change.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the traditions around here is opening up with the humble beginnings, in a sense. So, walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Sure, yeah. So a buddy of mine has been playing D&D for a long time. He just said, "Hey, you want to get some people together, play some D&D?" I wasn't particularly interested, but he is my friend, so like, yeah, just to humor him, I'll play once, and then like, so he won't bug me anymore. And then like years later, now I'm the dungeon master.
Should I count you as someone who's become converted into the Forever DM cult?
I am not exactly forever DM, but almost always, yes. I get to play very rarely. Maybe once a year I'll get to play, but other than that, yeah, I'm the DM. But I enjoy it. I think I enjoy DMing more than I do playing a character.
I've thought about doing a sketch of a Forever DM's Anonymous, like Alcoholics Anonymous. But now the original Nimble 5e, which came out about a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
was a relatively light affair compared to what the second edition is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to these sort of things, I've seen a pattern of people playing D&D and then house ruling their way into becoming backseat developers. Was that a case with how Nimble came to be? Was it just a collection of house rules that you were using?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So over the course of playing a few campaigns, I would constantly tinker with things, try things, and some things would stick. They were a lot of fun. Other things, they would get cut, right away because obviously, oh, well, this is obviously broken. This doesn't make things more fun. It makes it terrible. So yeah, over the years of DMing, that's pretty much how it came about. It was just some rules for my own table, and then I said, hey, why don't I put it together in a little booklet and give it away to people. I think I had it on the DMs Guild for a while for free or for $1 or something, and like I think nobody ever saw it or bought it. I said, well, why don't I try a Kickstarter? So expecting to like lose money or break even if I was lucky. Ended up doing really well, and then right away people started asking for Nimble to be its own system, because initially it was just like a set of modular lightweight rules that you could sort of play on top of 5e, but right away people wanted to they wanted more, so that's what this past year has been, working on that.
I can get that. Now, since I think for a lot of people this second edition is going to be their first introduction to what you've been doing with Nimble, so I'm going to be going through some of the primary rules that you had set up and trying to get a feel for what prompted these particular changes, and is this going to be further refined in second edition? So the first one is rolling to hit. I know that MCDM is doing a similar thing where you're just rolling the damage die, you're not rolling to hit.
Yep.
So this particular system, what prompted it was just a case of a lot of people hitting the wiffle bat.
Yeah, I mean, missing like half the time like isn't particularly fun. Like some classes get to do like 2 or 3 things on their turn, and like by the time you hit level 5 you get extra attacks, so like maybe you can make up for like the one miss thing. but that feeling of, you know, turns taking so long, only to be paid back with, like, I missed and my whole turn is a waste. Like, that just really feels bad. So whenever possible, I like to have things take as few steps as possible, so that the turns can go around the table much more quickly. There's less waiting, there's less downtime, like you can be more actively involved. So I like to think of it like, if you're watching a movie, like if you're watching Star Wars, for instance, like Luke and Leia, they probably like brush their teeth and they have breakfast and like they do all these different things, but that's not really relevant to the point of the movie. So all of that stuff is just cut. So all of the you know, rolling this die and adding this thing and then talking with the DM, and then the DM checks the stat block and then he tells you if you hit, and then you get more dice and you roll those dice, and like all of those steps are just not necessary, right? So you cut the things that are not necessary, and what you're left with is like a really good movie, at least hopefully, or a much better RPG. So the waiting and fiddliness is wherever possible, it's trimmed out, and what you have left is the fun parts.
Now, because of the approach when it comes to the whole primary die rule, is it still going to be a case where if that primary die lands on a 1, the attack misses? Otherwise, you're doing damage?
Yep, exactly. So if you have a dagger, you roll your 1d4, and if it's 2, 3, or 4, you hit. If it's a 1, you miss. So same with the d12 weapons, like the much larger weapons, you're going to hit much more often. So you're going to hit, like, you know, 92% of the time. The daggers are going to hit 75% of the time. So yes, that core system is still the same. To sort of balance the different die sizes, you will roll a crit anytime you roll the maximum on a die. So a dagger is going to crit 25% of the time, and it's going to miss 25% of the time. So there's this really cool symmetry. If you want to crit a lot, you can, you know, pick a smaller weapon die size. If you want to just hit more reliably, then you can pick a larger die size. That's sort of the core of the system. And it makes the weapon choices really kind of interesting, rather than just like, you know, I'll just pick the weapon with the bigger die, you know.
Yeah. And I think the name of speeding that up is also the reason why you have crits ignoring armor.
Yeah. So different. Most monsters are unarmored. So if you roll a d6 plus 2, like that's how much damage you do. You just d6 plus 2. But there certain monsters are going to have medium or heavy armor. Meaning a medium armor, they ignore any damage modifiers. So if it's d6 plus 2, it's just going to be the d6. For medium armor, for heavy armor, they're going to take half of that. So it's d6, and whatever you roll, it's cut in half. So to get across the feeling of like a tough monster with heavy armor, or something that's able to dodge more of the damage, we have that. So rather than just like inflating the hit points, you know, my tactics don't need to change. Like, oh, this, you know, this guy has, you know, heavy armor. I guess I'll just attack, just like if it has like you know, light armor or no armor. When it impacts the attack that way, it leaves room for some really interesting tactics. So the class is like a barbarian type of class that's rolling like a d12 weapon. They're going to be much more effective against unarmored enemies. And then maybe like a rogue type of class that's like dual wielding daggers, they're going to be much more effective against something with heavy armor, like the blade can sort of slip in between the plates or the scales of the dragon, or so to speak. So there's interesting tactics, like I'll get this guy, you get that guy. Or a fighter type of class, like they can carry different weapons, and the different weapon types actually matter depending on who they're fighting. So it really fills in this fantasy that a lot of people have, but the mechanics of 5e don't particularly support that well.
Which is ironic, because everybody keeps telling me that you can run any kind of fantasy with 5e, which I've often joked in response and said, yes, but that's kind of like saying Gary Coleman is a taller version of Webster.
Right. Or like Henry Ford, you can have any color car you want as long as it's black. You know, so like 5e is great. Like the core system of 5e, like it's the most popular for a reason. Like there's some really, really good things there, and yeah, what Nimble does is it takes the good core, and then, you know, prunes away a lot of the cruft and fluff and extra things that have just sort of remained due to tradition over the past 40, 50 years.
Yeah, the tradition thing has been an issue. I've been very critical of that, and I've said that if you want to see where that tradition thing ends, look at what's happened when it comes to sim racing. Um, constantly trying to maintain this tradition idea of realism at the expense of everything else. Um,
Yep.
but I know it's talks about saving throw spells ignoring monster armor. Is it a case where for spells that would have a saving throw that aren't doing damage, would they just hit?
So monsters will so like for like an average monster like a goblin or a kobold, if the saving throw DC is say 12, they'll just roll a d20. If they get 12 or higher, then they succeed, they save. So it's just going to be a straight d20 roll for many monsters. If you're fighting like a mage or some like smart creature, a bard or a mage, and they're making like an intelligence save, then they would just roll with advantage. So this saves a lot of time of like checking the stat block. It saves a lot of space on the stat block where you don't have all these stats that are sort of getting in the way. And it really saves a lot of time. When the d20 stops rolling, everybody at the table instantly knows whether they saved or failed. So removing all of these kind of tiny little steps, each one only takes like 3 or 4 seconds. But if you're doing that like 100 times, or a couple hundred times in like one game session, then like all of a sudden one encounter might take an hour or two, right?
Yeah.
So it's been streamlined a lot, but there are still saves. There's much fewer of them, but when a save is triggered, it's usually a lot more impactful.
Yeah. So given that, how is this particular system impacting armor? Since heavier armor is usually giving you a higher AC, which is usually giving you a bigger chance to evade. Is it a case where armor is providing DR?
Yeah. So armor providing damage resistance was in some of the earlier drafts. So like if you have like a lot of armor and a shield for a player character, like maybe you can subtract 5 from all the damage you get. The problem with that is with creatures that deal like small amounts of damage, like a barbarian, for instance, could like go into a goblin encampment and just like lay down and take a nap. And not only that, but it adds an additional mathematical operation to every single attack that you take. So in terms of fantasy and gameplay mechanics, it's close to what we want, but it's not exactly what we're going for. The ideal situation, I think, where we landed on is a more ideal situation where the players are involved and it's a decision rather than some automatic thing. Like in 5e, a lot of times it's like, well, my turn's over. Wake me up when it's my turn. That kind of thing. So in Nimble, how armor or AC works is if you're not doing anything to defend yourself, you just take the damage. So if a goblin attacks you for 5 damage, you take 5 damage. But every class has armor. So like spellcasting classes, they might have like a relatively low armor, like maybe 5 or 6 armor. Paladin type classes, like really a bunch of armor and shields and stuff, they might have like 15 or 20 armor. So in order to use it, you have to use you have to use a reaction to defend yourself. So if you're just standing there, not doing anything to defend yourself, you just take the damage, and you can use this defend reaction once per round. So it's sort of an interesting, question. I got hit for like relatively small amount of damage. Do I just take it or do I defend it? Because maybe there's going to be another monster that's going to attack me in just a second. Maybe it'll deal a little bit more damage to me. Or if say your wizard friend is getting ganged up on, he's going to defend, but like once he's defended himself, he's sort of vulnerable to other attacks. So there's other reactions and other cool teamwork things that everybody else can do to help protect you as well. So if the guy next to you is being attacked, then you can interpose, you can push them out of the way and take the attack yourself. So players have more active ways to defend themselves, and they have more say over what happens in combat. It feels really good as a player to be able to do that kind of stuff. It feels really like heroic, and you can actually be a tank type of class in Nimble. But for the GM, it also feels good. Like you can sort of be ruthless. Like you can just like you just really go for it as hard as you want. And the heroes, they have different tools to like mitigate things and do different tricks. So it's more fun on both sides of the GM screen.
Oh. Now, with that in mind, the next thing I'd want to cover is you going with an action point system, which is I'm certainly no stranger to that. And well, that's more or less what Pathfinder Second Edition has been doing. What prompted shifting to an action system instead of the economy of actions that you're going with?
Yeah, so 5e has sort of a very heavily structured action economy, and like half the classes, maybe more, like don't really have anything useful to do as their bonus action. So like it just sort of feels bad that like you're sitting at the table as a fighter and like you get your one attack, and then like all the other players are like this one guy he can do like 5 or 6 things on his turn, it feels like, and like you're just doing like your one measly little thing. So increasing the agency that each player has, it generally will increase the fun that they have. So rather than shoehorning someone into like move, action, bonus action, reaction, that kind of thing, it's freed up. You can do whatever you want. You have 3 actions. Do whatever you want. If there's a ranger type of character, someone with a bow, and they get perched up in some great area, and they don't have to move, well, then they should be able to do more. And for someone else, if I want to move twice and then attack, like I should be able to do that also. So it gives the players the flexibility that everybody badly wants, and it feels like it should already be a thing, but for some reason D&D has sort of stuck with a more rigid, sort of very strange action economy, and having to explain what a bonus action is, and it's not just like an extra action you can do to new players. It's really just kind of confusing.
And of course, I'd also noticed the whole thing with reactions, where you, instead of just having one reaction, you have the reaction options, but using them too much is going to penalize you when it's your turn again.
Right. So you get 3 actions to use on your turn. If you use a reaction, that costs one of your action. A reaction is just an action that you take when it's not your turn. So there's this choice, like, do I defend? If I defend now, then I'll miss out on one action during my turn. But on the other hand, turns aren't taking like 5 or 10 minutes, because if someone is spending all their actions making reactions, doing other things, then their turn comes around, they don't have any actions at the end of the turn, they get all 3 of their actions back. So it keeps the game moving, and it makes things interesting choices rather than just sort of automatic things. So like in 5e, whenever anybody moves, whether it's a monster or a hero, it immediately triggers like 2 or 3 or 4 opportunity attacks. So like nobody wants to move. But in Nimble, monsters don't make opportunity attacks. And heroes can make opportunity attacks, but they're made with disadvantage, and it costs you one of your actions. So there's a chance that you can act. Maybe you can kill that monster before it runs away, but you're less likely to hit. So different things like that. So rather than it being an automatic thing that just slows the game down, or like there's just sort of like gridlock in the middle of the combat, like nobody wants to move around, you have much more dynamic fights, and things are just more interesting when there's freedom to choose what to do with your turn.
Yeah. Now, given that when it comes to spellcasting, this is where I have to have a bit of a laugh, because you're going with a monopoint approach, which was somewhat in the DM's guide, but not quite committed to. It was just trying to hodgepodge together the spell levels thing, and I will be flat out honest, I've never been, when I started when I was a little kid, I was never a fan of the Vancian model for spellcasting, and I still am not. But I'm curious what made you shift to a monopoint system instead of the spell charges.
Sure, yeah. So it's essentially the same thing as the actions, just for spells. So with actions, you have 3 actions, spin them how you want. Instead of like I have 5 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 2 spell slots and 1 level 3 spell slot. It's just been opened up. You have like X amount of mana, like 10 mana or 20 mana, and a level 3 spell costs 3 mana. A level 1 spell costs 1 mana. So it's the same concepts, just way easier to track. You have 1 resource to track rather than like 9 different resources to track. So it's just giving the players agency over their turns a little bit more, and at the same time simplifying the game. So anytime you can do that, we can simplify it and make it more fun, then that's probably going to be the right call.
Yeah. Now, with that particular thing in mind, on the monster end of things, is it largely going to be the same as how you have it in 1E regarding how attacks work, how AC works, and the like? Yeah. So monsters, you can run any 5e monster pretty much as is. Just run the stat block just as it's written. The only change is you just ignore the d20, the to hit roll. You just roll the damage dice. So if it's a goblin with 1d6 plus 2, you just roll the d6. So they attack just like heroes. If they have a bonus action or whatever, they just get to do that. So they don't have the action system like the heroes do. So they stay easy to run for the GM. If you're running like 5 or 10 goblins, you don't have to make a bunch of different choices and all this sort of stuff. So it's very straightforward. You just sort of run the monsters as they're written, with that 1 minor change. And if you want to give them armor, you can they can either be unarmored or medium armor or heavy armor, and that can be based off their AC. Yeah. Now, when it comes to feats, which I couldn't help but chuckle at you putting in that feat joke in the text.
Yep.
With a lot of them, there were a handful that were changed. With the second edition book, are you planning on putting in something like a conversion guide for people who want to bring in feats from non-core materials into their Nimble campaigns?
The second version of Nimble, this one that just got crowdfunded, it's its own separate RPG. So it is 5e compatible, but the expectation is that you do not need any 5e books whatsoever. If you wanted to, it would be pretty easy. If you wanted to like pull in a 5e spell or a 5e class or something like that, you could certainly do that. But if you're going to be playing a 5e class, you would sort of you would use the 5e spells and subclasses and feats and all that sort of stuff. You wouldn't necessarily mix and match. But if you wanted to, again, it would be fairly easy to do that. In Nimble, there is a system. There's a boon system that is not. It's not exactly like feats, but it can be used similarly. It's up to the GM though. So if you have like a primary attribute, instead of taking that attribute, that stat increase, you could say, for instance, pick a greater boon as an option. And if you have a secondary stat, you could pick a lesser boon. So like, you get extra hit points, you get extra movement speed or something like that. The idea is that they are used as sort of like a quest reward. So you help the Elven Queen rescue her daughter, and she blesses you with this boon. It's like maybe you're brave now, and you get some extra bonus to resist fear or some other effect. So that is a system in Nimble. If you wanted to pull anything from 5e, you certainly could, but the system in Nimble is just a little bit different.
Yeah. Now, on the backer kit page, you talk about instant initiative that serves the story. So are we dealing with something akin to popcorn initiative in terms of how it works, or do you have something different in mind?
A little bit different. So Popcorn Initiative, a lot of people like it, and that's definitely an option. But it's just a little bit different. Popcorn Initiative, in my experience, can be a little bit tricky to track, and a lot of tables have fun with it. But in Nimble, how initiative works is everybody rolls their d20 and adds their initiative modifier, but the DM doesn't care who gets what. So normally, each hero gets 3 actions, and what initiative does is it determines how many actions you get on your first turn. So if you roll a single digit number, so like 1 through 9, you start your first turn with 1 action. If you roll double digits, 2 actions, and if you roll 20 or higher, you get all 3 actions. So the initiative roll that you get has been decoupled from the turn order. So someone say the barbarian throws the first punch, like the bandits are smack talking and the barbarian says, I throw the first punch, and the GM says, all right, roll initiative. Even if he gets a 1 on his initiative, he can still go first and swing a punch in combat. He gets his 1 action, then his turn's over. So whoever wants to go first, whoever's ready first, can go first. So there's still the really dexterous rogue who like rolled the 37 or whatever on his initiative. He's still rewarded for having a very high initiative, even though he doesn't necessarily have to go first. So whoever's ready first goes first, and then when their turn is done, you just go around the table. Whoever's next can go, and then the GM will generally save the monster turns for the end of the round.
Yeah, which I'd say is how a lot of people handle it, and because of that approach, would it be within the rule set if somebody wants to pass on their particular initiative that they could give it to somebody who's already acted?
So rules is written no, but if for instance like 2 people strategically wanted to team up and like swap their turns for 1 round, like they could definitely do that. I wouldn't recommend doing it too much, otherwise it might get confusing, like who went, who didn't go. But the idea is you save the time from having to like go as slow as the slowest player in 5e. But in Nimble, you get to go as fast as the fastest player. So whoever's ready first can just go ahead and start. Or the DM can just select, like, oh, you make sense going first for the story, like the barbarian who threw the first punch. So there's no, I don't want to take my turn, you take my turn instead. But there are some spells and abilities where, like, I can give someone else an additional action to use on their next turn. So there are some cool teamwork abilities and spells like that. But no, it is expected that if you're playing, like you kind of want to play, you want to take your own turn, you want to do some cool stuff.
Now, continuing on from that, you talked about overhauling rests. Now, a lot of class features have the whole you can only use this once per short rest or once per long rest or a number of times for either. Sometimes doing it a little bit too much, but you've talked about overhauling rests. So I'm curious what that overhaul ends up manifesting as.
Yeah, so abilities, so short rests are only used for spinning your hit dice and healing hit points. So all classes are in unison. So if someone wants to short rest, then that's all it's for. So there's no monk or warlock who gets back important class resources when they short rest. That's sort of just like a mechanical and story fail, I think. So things are either per long rest or whenever you roll initiative, like a per encounter type of basis. So everybody is always on the same page in regards to whether we want to keep pushing forward or whether we want to long rest. There's no longer like the divided priorities between, like, you know, half the party wants to short rest, half the party wants to keep going. But I think that the most important part is that long rests are restricted to safe areas where the DM designates. So no more like, because you know you had one fight and someone lost 3 hit points and they spent one of their spell slots. All right, let's long rest just so we're all topped up, you know, in the middle of this, you know, spooky dungeon. That kind of thing is just absolutely game breaking for the DM. It slows the game down. It can ruin the story. Like at the same time, I don't blame players for doing like the most optimal thing. So the solution with Nimble is to just remove that choice from the player's hands. The party can rest when they get back to town, or when the DM says, hey, they find some oasis or something where they can rest. The resting is in the DM's hands, so that even small, relatively easy encounters still matter, because like even if you just lost 2 hit points, like you're not going to get those hit points back unless you like spend some resource, or until you like it really matters. So when players can just long rest basically whenever they want, it really trivializes a lot of combat encounters, and it makes things very difficult for the DM to balance.
So with that in mind, when it comes to magic, this is where this was kind of answered when you said that it's doing its own thing with classes, but considering the auto-scaling thing of of like the Warlock's limited spell abilities, uh, how would you do an equivalent to that? To have that kind of feel with your equivalent of Warlock?
Yeah, so the Warlock in Nimble is called a Shadowmancer, and they summon like little shadowy minions. And the Warlock can get their class resource back, the mana back, when their minions make a critical hit. So they're incentivized to do the cool mechanical things, summoning these minions, throwing them at the enemies, and then they're also incentivized to actually use their mana rather than just like hoarding it. Like I only have like 3 spell slots, so I don't want to like spend one of them. I might need it later. So you're incentivized to use it because you only regain it if you've actually spent it first. So each class has different ways to regain their resources. Some just get a big chunk when they roll initiative. Others can gain resources as the combat encounter drags on. So each class sort of has its own different way to gain and use their class specific resource.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to skills, that's one thing that has always been kind of a third wheel ever since a full-on skill system was introduced in 3rd edition.
Yeah.
I know some will say, what about the thief skills before 3rd edition? And I'm like, that was a class feature. That wasn't a full-on integrated skill system, which has kind of been the problem. But you're going with a approach of what you refer to as a flexible skill system. So I'm curious how that is going to work.
Yeah, so in 5e, how skills work is, like you choose these proficiencies at level 1, and then, unless your stats go up, unless your proficiency bonus goes up, you're stuck. Like, if the paladin decides, I don't want to be good at this anymore, I want to be good at this other thing instead. Well, too bad, sucks to be you.
Yeah.
In Nimble, so you still have your stat bonuses that you add to your skills, but importantly, there's roughly half as many skills, so that each skill that you choose does more things. So rather than history and religion, those two have been combined into lore, and rather than like persuasion and deception, that's been combined into influence. So generally, someone who's good at persuading is going to also be good at deceiving if they want to be. So rather than having like 18, 19, 20 skills, however many it is in 5e, there's only 10, so that they're less diluted. Each choice that you make matters a lot more. So there's no more like, I'll never use my religion skill in this entire year-long campaign. Like there's no more of that. But when you're making a character at level 1, you get a number of skill points. You can put 5 skill points, essentially wherever you want. And then whenever you level up, you get an additional skill point. You can increase any one of your skills by 1, and you can move, if you like, 1 point in an existing skill into another one. So if you thought your guy is going to be really big on like animal handling and nature and all this sort of stuff, but the campaign ends up being like a city campaign with political intrigue, you can move these skill points over a certain period of time to like focus on the things that you find out you want to do more in this campaign. So you have this flexibility to customize your character and to learn more about the things that you want to be better at.
Mm-hmm. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to get into a bit of the classes that are exclusive to Nimble 2e, and I think there's a couple of key things before we even get into what they can do that I'd want to nail down. First, is this still a 20 level spread for classes?
Yes, it's still 20 level spread to keep things 5e compatible, but the classes have been made with the knowledge in mind that realistically people will generally play the first 5 to 10, maybe 12 levels. Mm-hmm. So all of the cool abilities are very much front loaded into the first 10 or 12 levels or so. And then beyond that, you can choose more of the abilities available to you. So you get more of a toolkit, but you don't really get additional cool mechanical, like additional things necessarily. So a lot of the skills and abilities are front loaded so that I don't have to wait until I'm level 17 to see this particular build come online, right? Like every level you're getting something really interesting, really cool.
Mm-hmm. So with So with that in mind, when it comes to subclasses, are they still cases where these subclasses are associated with individual classes, or are they a bit more freeform?
Yeah, so each class currently gets two subclasses, and they're sort of different flavors of that class. So our take on the cleric is called the shepherd, and the subclasses are the shepherd of life and the shepherd of death.
Mhm.
And one focuses more on radiant spells and healing and boosting their allies, and the other is more like a damage type of class of necrotic damage and doing other sort of spooky things.
Yeah.
So most of the classes have two, and some of the classes have a special, what I'm calling story-based subclasses, where if something happens in the story, then it opens up the possibility of changing your subclass into one of these different ones.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is go through the core classes and get a feel for what would be equivalents within the system.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're doing these in alphabetical order, and I can't do the artificer for reasons that have been well established,
Yep.
let's start with barbarian.
Yeah, so the barbarian, and initially in development, these classes were just called, it was the barbarian, it was the warlock, it was the ranger. But as I was getting feedback from people, rather than looking at these as like new classes, like it's the new take on this class, people would get caught up on, well, that's not a warlock, that's not what a warlock should be. Like a warlock should be, X, Y, and Z. So people a lot of times have a hard time having anything change. So rather than a warlock, like, all right, well, I'll change the name to a shadowpancer. I'll change the name to these other things, so that sort of frees me up conceptually to do different cool things without the expectation of this is what a rogue, this is what a ranger, should be, right? So the barbarian is called a berserker. So it feels very similar to a barbarian flavor-wise. But mechanically is like I think far more interesting, tactically and flavor-wise.
Mm-hmm. So next would be the bard.
Yep. The Nimble bard is called a song weaver, and it has two different subclasses where like one is much more focused on buffing their allies, buffing their party, and the other is more offensive, like debuffing the enemies.
Mm-hmm. All right. Obviously next is the cleric.
Yep, cleric is the shepherd. The shepherd of life and the shepherd of death are the two subclasses. And then for the subclasses for the songweaver are songweaver of courage and songweaver of snark. And then I think I forgot to say the berserker.
Mm-hmm.
The subclasses for the berserker are path of the mountain heart, which is a very defensive sort of burly one. Then path of the red mist, which is obviously very offensive.
Mm-hmm. Now, then we have the class that is a mystery, the druids, or the druids.
Yep, the druid is called a storm shifter, and they have the circle of sky and storm where they have access to wind and lightning spells, and then there's a circle of fang and claw, going more like a melee type of shape-shifting build.
Mm-hmm. So next is the fighter.
Yep, fighter is called the commander. And there's the vanguard and the bulwark. The commander is really interesting. It's a much more of an intelligence, strength and intelligence based class. So it's not just like a big dumb guy with a big dumb stick. They have they can like really command the battlefield and tactically reposition the allies and do different cool things.
Yeah. Now, after that would be of course my namesake, the monk.
Yeah. The monk is unfortunately sort of the redhead stepchild. It could use a little bit of love in 5e. The monk is called the Zephyr in Nimble, and you have the Way of Pain and the Way of Flame. And they're super fast. They can do a lot of really interesting things that none of the other classes can do.
On the backer kit it says Swift, so I'm guessing that got changed during development.
Yeah. A lot of the names and art has gotten updated since the backer kit campaign. Yeah.
Which is perfectly fine. Because, and I can see why the monk has gotten a slightly better run of things, but martial classes throughout D&D's history have gotten the short end of the stick for decades.
Yeah.
Especially,
Yeah, unfortunately.
a lot of times due to the fact that caster folk in the playtests would scream bloody murder if you gave the martial characters something interesting, and this is not a new problem because I got reports of this problem all the way back in third.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that martial caster divide has definitely been closed up. That was sort of one of the very first things that was done in development, making sure that the balance across the level curve is a lot more fair. So it's not identical. So the different classes will definitely shine in different instances, but each one is very competitive all the way across the level curve.
Mm-hmm. And the nadir when it came to the monk was third edition, where they were the poster boy for are you familiar with the term MAD, or multiple ability dependency?
Yep.
Yeah. But next, the paladin.
Yeah, the paladin is called the Oathsworn, and they have the oath of refuge and the oath of vengeance. The paladin class Oathsworn. They also get a story-based subclass called the Oathbreaker. Obviously. So the good boy paladin, they swear these oaths to protect others or to avenge others. But if they happen to break that oath, or if something happens, they can choose this other sort of edgelord subclass, the Oathbreaker.
Mm-hmm. And next is another class that has gotten the short end of the stick since day one, the Ranger.
The Ranger in Nimble is called the Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So fairly straightforward. The Hunter is sort of a hybrid class. It is sort of the ranged weapon class, but they start off having certain abilities. They can do really cool stuff at range, and then in order to recharge their abilities, they have to run into melee and start dropping people, and then they'll sort of rebuild their resource that way. But there's the Primal Stalker and the Survivalist Hunter. And I actually just got done with another revision of that, and that class is really feeling a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And they also get a story-based subclass that opens up for the people who really like to have a pet, a companion. They have the Beastmaster Hunter.
Mm-hmm. And next would be the Rogue.
Yep, the Rogue. Yep, Rogue is one of my favorites. It's called the Cheat in Nimble, and they get to do a lot of like really sneaky, shady things. It out of all of the classes, the Berserker and the Cheat were done first, and they are sort of crowd favorites. There's the Assassin and the Scoundrel, and they do all sorts of nasty things. They feel really cheaty when you're playing them. Like the flavor really shines through in the mechanics on all these classes.
Yeah, I could see it. I'm reminded of Garrett from the Thief games, in the sense that he's not a master swordsman. He's a thief. You should not be playing fair when playing as him.
Yeah.
So calling
the Cheat can change their dice. Like you roll one number, you can change it to another number. They could do like really cool things that just thematically really feel like you're cheating at the table.
Yeah, I remember writing a gambler class at one point, and a lot of people were were suggesting card gimmicks, and I was like, no, that's close to the mark. But the bigger part of the gambler is knowing when to play dirty and when not to.
Yep.
The kind of person who will have somebody who will find a way to know what the dealer's hands are without them even noticing.
Right. Yeah.
And the smartass in me wants to retitle the cheat the Guerrero, but not as many people would get that. If you do, you're one of the real ones.
Whatever you want to call it.
Because you lie, cheat, and steal. But next is the Sorcerer, not to be confused with his Horserer.
Yeah, so the Sorcerer and Wizard have been combined into one class, the Mage. And there's the Mage of Chaos and the Mage of Control. So the Chaos Mage, very much similar to the Wild Magic Sorcerer, and the Mage of Control is closer to the Wizard, where they can sort of like just cause cool things to happen during combat without having to roll on a table. So one is a lot more chaotic, and the other is like more reliable.
Given that, would the mage be getting meta magic by default the way the sorcerer does?
Yep, exactly right.
Uh,
And it is it's called spell shaper abilities, and you can do different. You can spend additional mana to change your spells in different interesting ways.
yeah, I can certainly get that. So to follow up to follow up on that, I suppose that's a good thing, because if there's any spellcasting class that really got the shaft in 5e, it is the wizard.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since it has the most dead levels. Which, speaking of which, before I get to the last one that I had, I did want to ask if you were addressing the dead level issue that that happened with some classes in 5e.
Yeah, exactly. It feels so bad, like when your buds are getting extra attack or other like really cool abilities. Oh, I got my 6th level spells, and then like all you get like, oh, I got nothing.
I got a rock.
I got some extra. I got 3 extra hit points. one more hit die. Every class at every level gets something cool.
And
so at level 1, level 1 is much simpler for every class. So like the spellcasting classes, it's like the wizard. If you're playing a wizard in 5e, like you have to go through like 2 or 3 dozen cantrips, and you have to pick some, and you have to go through like 2 or 3 dozen like first level spells and pick some. It's just like the choices are overwhelming for like a new player, even experienced players. So at level 1, a mage just gets cantrips, and you don't have to sort through a bunch. Like you get like these 6 cantrips. And then at level 2, you get a little bit more, and so each level you get a little bit more, so that no particular level is overwhelming, but at each level you are getting some cool thing. In each class, as they level up, they have access to different abilities that they can choose. So like for instance, the Berserker, he has a set of like 10 or 12 different abilities that he can choose from, called a Savage Arsenal. And every few levels, you can pick a new ability to learn from that Savage Arsenal, and like as you level up, you get access to more like cool tools that you can do like crazy things with.
Mm-hmm. Now, to that end, when it comes to subclasses, is it a case where everybody's going to get their subclass at a certain level, or is it the varied approach that you see with 5e?
Yeah, good question. Every class gets their subclass and different subclass upgrades at the same levels. So you get your first subclass at level 3, then level 7, level 11, and 15. So every class is the same. So everybody at the table is going to be getting their subclass and their different abilities at the same rate.
Mm-hmm. Which certainly makes sense. So the last one is the Warlock. Technically, the last one is Wizard, but you already answered that.
Yep. And the Nimble Warlock is called the Shadowmancer. And he's able to summon like hordes of little minion pets. They're just expendable, faceless summons that you can summon and just throw at the enemies. And then there is the Pact of the Red Dragon and the Pact of the Abyssal Depth. Mm-hmm. So you can actually have an ancient red dragon as your patron if you want to, which is pretty sweet.
Now, if somebody wanted to do the... Well, actually, let me rephrase this. Do you still have something equivalent to the Pact boons, like the Pact of the Chain, the Pact of the Tome, the Pact of the Blade, and so on?
Yeah, not exactly those packs, but yes, there are different invocations that you can pick. There's greater and lesser ones. The lesser ones are more like role-playing, flavor-focused, mm-hmm. And the greater ones have like a mechanical impact on combat. So rather than forcing you like, well, everybody has to take Agonizing Blast, like, oh, that, so it's not really a choice if like everybody always takes it, and so. Rather than that, at this level you get a lesser boon, a lesser invocation. At this level you get a greater one. So the lesser ones are balanced with each other, and then the greater ones are balanced with each other. So it makes it more of an interesting choice, and people are freed up to pick the the fun ones that don't necessarily increase your damage, but like ones that would make playing the class more fun.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly get that. Earlier you mentioned Berserkers having a Berserker arsenal, which the way you described it sounded like a series of sub-abilities. My question is it a case where the other classes will have some sort of similar pool of sub abilities if they're not casters?
Yep. So the Berserker gets Savage Arsenal. The Cheat gets underhanded abilities. The Commander gets combat tactics and weapon mastery. So yeah, each class gets its own set of abilities that it can choose from, and so you can really customize the class and make different combinations to suit you. So like if you want to be like this kind of a commander, you can do that. If you want to be a commander that like buffs his allies more, you can be that. If you want to be a more defensive one, or a more like one who like I carried like all of the weapons and I always have the right weapon for the job, like you can fulfill all those different fantasies in those ways, the way you customize your class.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned Mage has an equivalent of the Wild Mage approach when it comes to chaos. Obviously, the infamous part of Wild Magic is the big ol' Wild Magic table. But since you're going more streamlined, how are you handling the equivalent of that to have that same chaotic presence with Wild Magic in Nimble?
Yeah, so if you choose the Mage of Chaos subclass, whenever you cast a spell that costs mana, like one of your leveled spells, they're called tiered spells in Nimble, just to avoid the confusion of like your class level versus the level spell. And people are always disappointed when they get to level 2 and they don't actually get their level 2 spells yet. So some of the wording and verbiage is changed just to clear up some of that confusion. But you can spend additional mana to invoke chaos, to roll on this table. Or whenever you crit with a spell, you can do that for free. And the chaos table is a d20 table, so 20 different options. If you roll a 20, something like really incredibly good happens. If you roll a 1, something really bad happens, and then everything in between. So sometimes it's really good for you, sometimes it's really bad for you, and sometimes it's just something wacky happens. So for the kind of person who enjoys that kind of thing, there's plenty of chaos to go around.
Which certainly makes sense. Now, with that in mind, when it comes to say, I'll use Songweaver as an example, since that's leaning into Bard. Bard obviously has the musical support aspect. Is it a case where where those songs would be their equivalent of that sub ability that they expand upon?
Yeah. So their special abilities they can choose from are it's called lyrical weaponry. So you might learn an inspiring anthem or a heroic ballad or a song of domination. So like those are the kinds, like these are the different songs that you learn, and they have different impacts on the battlefield. Yeah. But Songweavers, they also get a special ability called a people person, where you make friends as you go along, and you can summon those friends to battle, or you can summon them to help you in various situations. So this very charismatic class, flavor-wise, like it makes sense that they would have some cool friends, and they'd be able to magically summon them, in their time of need. And it feels really cool to be able to do that kind of thing, both in terms of fleshing out your backstory, like, well, how did you meet this hill giant that you can summon? How did you meet this other thing? And it's so far it's been really, really fun.
So with that in mind, I want to shift a bit into monsters. So you're talking about having a legendary monster system, and I'm guessing this is your equivalent to layer actions and legendary actions in Core 5e. How does it manifest here?
Yeah, so you can just run a legendary monster just exactly as written. If you're running Curse of Strahd, you want to run it in Nibble, you could just do that. You just run Strahd exactly as it's written, and it's going to work pretty much as expected. All the levels, the amount of damage that classes can output across the level curve, the amount of damage that they can sustain, is basically identical to 5e. So you could just run it as default. But with solo monsters, they're notoriously difficult to balance because each table has different party size. Each table has, a lot of different things going on. So the solution for that was the legendary monster system that we have is legendary monsters, they act after each player's turn. So rather than getting their own turn, this dragon acts after each player. So you can have one stat block that is balanced for 2 players and it's balanced for 10 players. And the GM has to do far less balancing and tweaking and it's much less fragile, so to speak. So, and it makes for a more interesting tactical problem to solve for the players as well, because by the time my turn comes around, like this dragon is going to be a different place, and I have to sort of plan out things a little bit differently, and it's a pretty fun puzzle for people to put together.
Yeah, I can certainly see it. Now, with that kind of thing in mind, I did notice in what little I could see of the monster entries there, you're going with the straight up level instead of the CR.
Right. Yeah. The CR system is it's great for certain things, but when you're trying to balance a solo legendary encounter, you have to basically create so many exceptions that you might as well just throw the CR system out. So regular monsters, they still have the CR. A goblin is still like a quarter CR. A bugbear is a 1 CR. But for solo monsters, like, all I need to know is, like, what level can I throw? At what level does my party have to be in order to throw, like, this owlbear at them? This legendary owlbear or this white dragon. That's all I want to know. I don't want to have to, like, if you have this many people in your party and there's multiple monsters, it's this. If it's only a solo monster, you have to do this and this. It's really, really fiddly and imprecise.
Mm-hmm.
So the solo legendary monsters, it's just a level 4 solo monster.
Mm-hmm.
So a level 4 party of any size can fight this and expect it to be a decent challenge. And if you want it to be a little bit harder, you can pick a level 5 solo monster, and it'll be a bit harder.
Yeah. Now, there were a few subclasses that were unlocked as stretch goals, and I do want to touch on those a little bit. You already kind of mentioned the Oathbreaker, which I think is, as I understand it, is meant to be your equivalent of the Blackguard, the Dark Paladin, that kind of approach.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right.
So what does it bring to the table in addition to what the Oathsworn can already do?
Yeah, so the Oathbreaker is basically, what happens when the Oathsworn or this paladin goes bad, right? So the Oathsworn, its main mechanic is that it can interpose for free. It can, it is very, very good at protecting its allies. A party feels far more protected, far more hardy when an Oathsworn is in the party.
Mm-hmm.
So the Oathbreaker is going to be sort of a twist on that. And most of the additional subclasses are still in development, the ones that were unlocked during the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So large strokes, we have them ready, but they're still drafts. So those are not quite released yet. But it's going to be like a third option as a subclass. So rather than the 2 subclasses that you have, it's going to be this, and with sort of like a cool dark twist on the class.
Mm-hmm. Which certainly makes sense. The next one I wanted to cover is the Spellblade, because the idea of a Gish is a popular thing that people want to venture into, and a lot of times it's a case where it ends up swinging too far one into the other, when what people want is somebody who integrates magic with their fighting style.
Yeah, so this is a subclass for the commander, and the commander already has strength and intelligence as his 2 key stats. So this is a sort of commander that leans a little bit more on the intelligence than the strength.
Mm-hmm.
But they still get armor, they still get awesome weapons. But for instance, they can like infuse their weapons with magic, or when they do certain things on the battlefield, they can infuse those commands or those orders with magical effects, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So they're still very much a fighter type of class, but one that has access to really interesting spells.
Yeah. A lot of times when people try and do the Gish, it just ends up being a kit bash of a fighter and a mage. And
Yeah. We don't want to tack on like an entire mana system with 50 spells to look through and all this sort of stuff just to have like a subclass.
mm-hmm.
So it's going to be much more streamlined and more flavorful than just like a bolt-on, like, oh, you can cast spells.
Yeah, because I think the problem with doing that is that the spell casting is still divorced from the fighting. If you're trying to be
Right.
magic fighter. You still want to be fighting.
Right. Right.
But-
You're not just a wizard with a sword. You're not just a fighter that can like throw fireballs. You know, it's something else.
Yeah. And now the other one would be the Shadow Reaver, which you describe as a martial subclass for Shadowmancer, which is interesting
Yeah.
since Shadowmancer is a caster, the way you've described it.
Yeah. So the Shadow Reaver is sort of us asking the question, what happens when your patron leaves you? Like maybe you betrayed the patron, maybe the patron betrayed you, maybe somehow in the campaign your patron gets killed. So like whatever happens, like you're sort of left on your own. So the Shadow Reaver uses their the cool cantrips that they get, like summon shadows and different things like that, to enhance their abilities and use them in melee. So they're still very, very fragile, but their different abilities sort of combine in a really interesting way to make them fill a really cool niche.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the Shadow Reaver is pretty spicy. Out of all of those, I think that one's probably at the top of my list right now as the coolest.
And of course, for the Hunter, you have the Beastmaster, which I think is from my guess, it's exactly what it sounds like on the tin. It is a Hunter with a Beast Companion.
Yeah. This is one of the story-based subclasses. So maybe you save the life of this little owlbear cub and he becomes your companion, or your life is saved by some dragon or wyvern that took a liking to you. Like whatever happens, something happens to where you got the attention of some animal or beast, and they want to follow you around. Like that is like a core fantasy for a lot of people. Like they want a pet to be able to do like sick combo moves with, in combat.
Yeah, and that's
So
the other
that-
thing I was
that
going to
is-
bring up.
Yeah,
A lot of times when you have that animal companion in a lot of games, they just end up being a second character sheet for the player, but not something that's really integrated with their kit. But it sounds like you plan on having some kind of system where they can do some sort of cooperative tactic.
Yeah, it's gonna be super well integrated. Like if I'm playing a hunter, I don't want like a second character sheet that I have to manage. So the beast that you have, your companion, isn't going to have. He's not going to have his own attacks. He's not going to have his own hit points, his own things that you need to track. When you take damage, so basically your hit point pool represents their hit point pool. So when like your owlbear takes damage, you take half as much psychic damage. So like when you're at 0 hit points, it's at 0 hit points as well. So we're coming up with some mechanics and some systems to make it flow really, really smoothly. Like the main priority is it has to feel fun and be easy to play at the table. Like it really has to fulfill the fantasy and really hit that mark, scratch that itch. But it can't take forever to play at the table. It can't have a 1,000 moving parts. Like some of the summon spells or animate object or whatever in 5e. Like I don't want to summon like 12 different teapots or 15 different wolves and have to manage all of that. Like that makes everybody else at the table hate you, right? So it has to be cool and fast and easy to play and easy to run without a whole lot of stuff to track. So doing some really cool combo moves where you could team up and do different things is the goal of the Beastmaster.
Mm-hmm. That certainly makes sense. Now, with that in mind, you're putting out 3 books: the Core Rules, the Game Master's Guide, and Heroes. Now, the Core Rules and Game Master's Guide, I can more or less put 2 and 2 together. Is Heroes just where all the classes are going to be in?
Yep, Heroes is all the classes, and then the Core Rules has like spells, some of the magic items, the rules, of course. The GM Guide has there's an included adventure. It's going to be levels 1 to 6. There's a bestiary with regular monsters and legendary monsters, and a ton of tips for first-time game masters. I remember my first time being the DM. I was really nervous and had a lot of questions, and could have used a little bit more hand-holding. So the adventure is made to be super easy to run, and it sort of layers on the complexity both for the GM as well as for the players. so that they can pick it up really, really quickly. Like the players, basically, the core rules basically says like the players don't even have to read it. The adventure that's included is intended to teach the rules as you play. So you can get together and in 5 minutes you have all your characters made, and minute 6 you're playing. Like you're learning how to play this game by starting. So that's the goal.
Mm-hmm. So, with that in mind, what are you shooting for as far as the page count for these 3 books?
Yeah. So the page count for the GM guide with the adventure and everything is probably going to be close to 80, 90 pages. And this can be not, so if you think about the regular D&D size books, it's half of that. So I think it's A5 is the book size.
Mm-hmm.
So they're small books that are easy to open up and bookmark and that kind of stuff. You can have it behind the GM screen without knocking things over, taking up all your space. So it's A5 book size. It's gonna be probably 80, 90 pages. The core rules is gonna be something like 60, 70 pages, and then the heroes is going to be around 80 pages as well.
Mm-hmm.
Of that, the actual rules are probably 6 pages, and everything else is sort of other, here's equipment and here's magical items and backgrounds and stuff. So everything is super light. Most of the time in editing has been, how can I reduce the word count in this and get across the point more quickly?
Yeah, I can certainly get that. And I think you also plan on putting in a short adventure with, well, it was short, now it's going to be expanded to go all the way to 5th level.
Yeah, it's going to be through 6th level, so it'll take you to level 7, and then there's sort of a mini setting that's included. You can continue playing that setting for a year or more if you want to. But the written content is there, and then there's a bunch of other adventure hooks to continue sort of the sandbox adventure for really however long you want. But the written adventures goes up through level 6.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens here.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
And anytime you see fit to return, whether it's for more of Nimble or to laugh at the dice gods screwing over everyone, because they always do, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody!
Soy